So I think we could just call the meeting to order. At this point in time, Travis, can I have you take it away as the vice chair, just to make sure we hit it all right?
Sure. So call the meeting to order. Who's taking notes? Or I guess we're recording. Never mind. So 3:03. So everybody got the agenda, right? Okay. So we need a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
And a second.
Susan.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. And everybody got the minutes from last time too? Okay, so need a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Anybody have any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, so vote to approve them. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. And are there any public comments for anything that's not listed on the agenda?
I did want to just let everybody know, Cameo, what's your last name?
Flood.
Cameo Flood is here with us as a guest, and she came into the office today, so she's sitting right here listening in with us, and will hear the presentation as I go through. But I did want to just let everybody know that we did have a member from the public here.
Thanks. So no public comments. So going to old business. So the first thing there is nomination and election of officers. I know we did some nominations last time, but I think there's been some developments. I know with Denver's ability to commit in the future. And it sounds like somebody, Susan, you had an addition to nominations, so I don't know how we want to do this. The bylaws state that we do this during the first meeting, which was the last meeting, and we kind of put it off to this meeting. So I guess do we want to redo nominations for all the positions and then vote at the next meeting, or?
So my only concern would be just looking at it administratively, if we nominate somebody who's not present, knowing if they accept that nomination or not.
And did that happen last time?
Well, I don't think it technically happened last time because Denver had stated that he would accept it, but then later had stated that he was not interested in fulfilling that role. And he did just message me saying he's racing home to join the call and his phone is nearly dead, but noting that he did state that he would not be interested in that position. If you guys were okay with it in the committee, I think we could proceed with nominations, knowing that, and we could confirm. Does that make sense to you, Travis?
Yeah, I guess just wondering what other people's thoughts are.
Sorry.
I think it'd be great to be able to do the nominations and the elections at this meeting so we can move that on and get on to business.
That's my thought as well.
Okay. And we do have a quorum, right? Yeah.
Well, Travis, would you be interested in being chairman? If so, I would place your name in nomination.
Okay. And I'm sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Go ahead. I would also like to nominate Christina as chair.
Do you accept the nomination?
Sure. But I'm not quite sure what the process here is, and so I think that maybe an open conversation, because Travis, you are certainly senior on this committee, and I would defer to your interest and not be interested in taking a leadership position if you were interested.
Yeah, I think you would be a great chair.
Well, I thank
But,
you for flattering me, but just transparently, if it's something that you are interested in, I would be fine, perfectly happy to pass the torch to you.
Now I'm in, sorry. Hey guys, I had a disconnection there, so I think we missed on the recording everything that happened from when you guys said, oh, we want to proceed with the nominations. Sorry about
that. Todd nominated me
So
and
this,
Susan nominated Christina for chair, or whatever the title is.
For chair. Yep.
Yeah.
Todd nominated.
And I guess it comes down to the votes. I mean, I'd be happy to do it. I'd be happy if you were. And so I have no qualms either way. So.
well, Travis, would you be interested in continuing as vice chair?
I would be happy in continuing in whatever capacity people feel comfortable with me proceeding in. So if you want to nominate me for vice chair, that's fine too. I can nominate others.
I would nominate Travis for vice chair and just ask for a vote on that slate of officers.
Who is running for chair?
You can run for more than one. Trying to. Is Shibu here? He's not.
Are the two officer positions, chair and vice chair, are there other officer positions, Bradley?
No, those are the two positions. Thanks. And so right now we've got Travis and Christina for chair, and also Travis as vice chair.
And I would nominate Shibu for vice chair as well, but he's not here to accept it.
So may I ask, who is the candidate for chair?
It sounds like we've had a nomination for Travis Hoffman and one for Christina Morski.
I will withdraw my acceptance of the nomination for chair. So.
Well, Travis, I would like to move then that we just by acclamation accept the slate of Christina as chair and you as vice chair.
Is there a second?
If this is Susan, I'd second that motion.
Discussion? Looks like Christina's frozen.
So it does.
There she is.
Sorry about that. Did everybody get booted, or is it a me tech problem?
Just you.
Oh, great. So, it just closed on me, so my apologies.
So, what was the last thing that you heard?
The last thing that I heard was I think we were moving to vote.
Okay, so since there was only nominations for us two, I withdrew my acceptance of the nomination for chair. And Todd moved by acclamation that we accept those. I don't remember how he put it, but you as chair, me as vice chair, and then Susan seconded it. And so I just opened the floor up for discussion.
We've got some rain moving through. I need to go close it. I'll be right back.
Hearing no discussion. Can you restate that, what you moved, Todd?
Yeah, I move that we just by acclamation accept the slate of Christina as chair and Travis as vice chair.
Okay, all those Do you have anything to, the floor is open for discussion right now. Denver, do you have anything to add? You're muted.
Thank you. Can you all hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so just a few words. First of all, apologies for being late. Had an event that was organizing this afternoon. I think it turned out to be a success, but was a great deal of work, and the help that I had kind of bailed on me. So I apologize for being late, but it's good to see you all again. Second of all, working with this committee is just a tremendous honor and privilege, and I've really enjoyed it. Third, I think that Christina is going to be an absolutely fantastic chair. I think that she'll bring a level of credibility to the committee that I think is really going to help in the work that Bradley and Nathan and their whole staff is doing. And I'm really excited to see her take on that role in leadership. So enthusiastically support that slate. And again, Travis, thank you for chairing this meeting, and thank you for continuing to serve in leadership.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? So hearing none, so all those in favor of Todd's motion, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say no. Okay, so we have Christina as chair and Travis as vice chair. Do you want to take over the rest of the meeting, Christina?
I sure can, or we can let Denver round this one out if you would like. I just quickly would like to say it's really an honor, and I look forward to working with all of you more. And I look forward to your insight in helping me come on board as a fairly new member to this committee and being able to move this work forward. So thank you for the honor, and I'm excited to be working with Travis as we move forward. He certainly knows far more about Robert's Rules of Order than I. Denver, do you want to chair this meeting as your last hurrah?
I'd love to. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Travis. Okay, so we have called the meeting to order. Have we approved an agenda and the minutes?
Yep.
Excellent. Are we on the election administrator update? Is that
Subcommittee
where we're at?
reports.
Subcommittee reports. Okay, great. Why don't we start with outreach? And I was actually going to give the outreach subcommittee report. So we've met a couple times since our last EAC meeting. We continue to have problems with our subcommittees with folks making the meetings, and fully understand we've all got a lot that we do and different kind of hats that we wear in our community. But in order for these subcommittees and this committee as a whole to really function and achieve its goals, we need to commit ourselves to meeting when we say we're going to meet, and that goes for myself as well. One thing that we talked about that I think would be a good idea is to combine the outreach and the recruitment subcommittees. We've talked before how that they are very similar in kind of their mission to be building connections within the community. And I think for the purpose of being able to have more productive meetings, have more people participating, and less of a burden on staff, it makes sense to combine the outreach and the recruitment subcommittee into one. The research subcommittee has a very distinct purpose and I think should remain its own separate group. So that's the first piece of business I want to report out on. Second, one of the ideas that came out of the outreach committee is there is very much a need to educate our community about voting, about the integrity of elections, about the accuracy of elections. We know this because we have an inside view and because we have these relationships with Bradley and his staff. most people don't. And maybe some assume that elections are transparent and accurate and run with integrity. But there's also, as we've seen, some actors within the community that are willing to create problems and create chaos around the presumption of controversy. And so we think that it makes sense to actively work to educate our community about not only the ways to vote and the process of how a ballot gets counted, but also just the services that are provided. So there are two resources that we think would really aid the elections office. The first is a set of educational short videos about different aspects of the elections process and office that gives just a little kind of inside view about how this process works and demystifies it for most people. Think of them as PSAs. And thankfully, Commissioner Slotnick liked this idea and brought it to the commissioners and is willing to put some money behind it. And Bradley, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the last I heard, there was about $30,000 to invest into a series of videos.
Yep, absolutely. Stealing my thunder for later, but yes, we did put in a budgetary request and it's for $40,000. That should make approximately 30 one-minute videos from our research and outreach. And we got that in as a one-time budget request for this next cycle. Just another way that we can kind of echo how these ideas coming through this committee can funnel into gaining some traction and some real world service. And that's exactly where we're at. Is right now we have that budget request in. We've looked at some local vendors, and this could give us the opportunity to produce really professional quality videos so that people can understand that process.
Excellent.
Can I ask where they would be shown?
So if we receive those videos, we'd be able to run them as PSAs online
Television?
through our website. We can also submit them as PSAs to run not nationally, but statewide on local broadcasting areas. Like, here's a PSA about how this process comes forward. So until we can really have them, we'll need to see where, but we could post a video library online, be able to share those out and provide access to anybody who wants to use those. And then also run them truly as PSAs with either just the voice for radio or run them on TV ads at the same point in time.
Okay.
And then I saw Commissioner Slotnick with his hand up. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, thanks.
Do you have a commitment from local media to run those? Or, I mean, if you just produce them and they're only available on the elections website, I don't think that serves much of a purpose.
And that's where we can partner with that outreach committee to make sure they get out to all the areas where you guys would like to see them getting in addition. I mean, my idea would be really hitting the major news media stations, doing a press release including these, sharing them out on YouTube and Facebook, social media, requesting other shares. Those can get upwards of 6,000 people watching just one video. And then from there on out, working with other election administrators, because a lot of this is statewide policy. We have reached out to the Secretary of State's office about this exact idea and are still waiting to hear back if they would be interested in partnering with us, like they've done in the past for election judge training videos.
Thank you, Bradley. Commissioner Slotnick, you had a question or a comment?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. So we're in the middle of our budget process right now where we entertain requests from all the different departments, and I feel confident that this is going to get funded, but I don't feel confident that it's going to get funded to the full amount. So because when we looked at this stuff from elections, we prioritized full funding for the return postage, and that's definitely, I mean, hasn't been voted on, but I'm positive it's going to happen. And I'm positive we're going to have funding for the videos. I'm just not certain that it's going to be the full funding, the full 40. So we may have to scale it back a bit or use it as leverage when asking for some other funding from Secretary of State or there are philanthropists out there, granting entities, but it'll get us off to a good start. And I would also want to encourage us to think about other ways in which to get the word out locally about this. And one idea that just jumped to mind, I did this while campaigning, was to have house parties, which sounds kind of corny, but once it started rolling, I was doing like 3 house parties a week. And the way this would work, people on this call would each volunteer to have a party. And you invite 10, 12 friends, you have some hors d'oeuvres, some drinks in your backyard, and we invite Bradley to come over, or Nathan, and talk for 15, 20 minutes about how elections work, and then answer questions. And it's a pleasant, fun thing. And then at that party, we say to the guests, would anybody else be willing to do this? And you can reach a lot of people, not just in large numbers, but people who are going to chat with their friends. And this worked really well. I was able to get the word out about what I was doing much more effectively than I would have guessed. And one party turned into probably 30 or 40. So, and it doesn't cost anything. Another idea is to chat, have Bradley or Nathan or someone from this group, Christina, could do it. Chat with some of our service organizations that meet regularly. And that could be Denver. Maybe you could help with some of the labor folks, but also things like the Kiwanis and the Rotary, and there's a handful of other service organizations that really enjoy having people come talk with them. And the benefit here is all those people go tell everyone else. And they could say, you know, that was a bunch of crap you saw in the newspaper about the elections. That person came and talked to us, and I feel really solid about them. So these things don't cost money, and we could just begin whenever we wanted.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would just add that once the content is produced, there's a lot of ways that we can get it out, whether it's small group meetings or through social media or through PSAs. There's lots of different venues. But before we can move to that step, we've got to have a product to be able to show people. The other idea that came out of the outreach committee is putting together a singular physical handout. Think like a trifold brochure that in one piece could outline the services provided by the elections office, the process for voting, ways to get registered, and ways to vote and also be active with the EAC. It's kind of a one-stop shop for all things election related. And again, once the trifold is produced, there's lots of different ways that it can be shared within the community. So those are the ideas that we've been talking about and working on in the outreach subcommittee. And are there any other questions or comments?
It would seem to me that spending the money on production is one thing. Are y'all still there?
We're still here. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So the money we're spending is on production of the PSAs or the little video things that then are going to be made available to social media, to mass media, to service clubs, that sort of thing. Is that correct?
Once the materials are produced, we can use them in a lot of ways. We can either put some money into paid advertising, or as individuals of the EAC, we can share it through various networks.
The $40,000 is for production, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So then it's produced, these little spots are produced, then it is up to somebody else, us dealing with social media and mass media to get them placed. Is that correct?
That is correct. Well, we as the EAC will work with the elections office to share this information in a variety of ways.
Okay, I think that that's probably a better way to spend the money than making a brochure. Brochures are, and this kind of hurts my feelings because it's what I did for a living, but they're kind of passé. They don't sell anything anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, and we could
Thank you
hit
for
a
your
lot of
comment.
different options too. You know, we, as you've seen in our outreach, we like to cover every available option, and we could dovetail this into our election judge recruitment as well.
Susan, it looks like you have a question or a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the print piece. I think that as we go out and do presentations to Kiwanis, Rotary, different groups and organizations, that to be able to also hand something to them that they can then review it, because the presentation will pique their interest and then the written material will solidify that interest. And it could also be set up that there's an insert in there that is a call to action to make sure people are registered to vote. I think it'd be a real important piece to do both.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Christina?
Thanks, Denver. I wanted to just echo a thanks for all the work that folks have done on this. There is interest, from partners across the community, folks like All Nations, to distribute information from us to their clientele, right? So the no wrong door idea, that anywhere somebody goes in our jurisdiction, they can receive information about elections, upcoming dates, how to get involved, the process. And just to share with the group, I had the opportunity to brainstorm with Bradley about some issues the other day. And one of the options we also have, right, as a public entity is partnering with other public entities, right? So I don't know what it takes, but maybe Missoula Water adds a note on one of our water bills, right, about upcoming election dates. Or being able to partner with community credit unions to distribute cards through their drive-through. I used to do that for the state when we ran a tax program. It was quite effective. So I think a lot of kudos should be given to this group for sort of the variety of ideas are being thought about in terms of outreaching to our constituency. So thanks for all of your hard work.
Thank you, Christina. Are there any other questions or comments from our outreach subcommittee report?
Denver, I had one other thing I wanted to point out, spinning off of what Christina was saying, and that's that another group that we had talked about in the committee meeting was title companies. Anybody who moves or buys a house, they all receive their title reports and all that, and we could have inserted in there information on voting and how to update your registration. And also property management companies, which could touch on the apartment group of people who aren't necessarily homeowners, but are still involved in the community. So there's a lot of different ways we can reach out using other companies within the community.
Thank you, Susan. Any other questions or comments?
One, Denver,
Josh.
just to distinguish the getting the word out about how to register to vote or where you can vote. That's sort of one thing. And then I think there's another set of information around what are the nuts and bolts of the election system and how does it work? And the first one is fairly traditional. The second one I think is really new. I don't know that we've ever done this. I don't know if very many election departments of counties anywhere have done this, but I feel like it's absolutely crucial in that right now there is an active effort to discredit us with the end goal of having some other entity manage our elections beyond Missoula County, and that it's super crucial. We really need to be hyper proactive on this. And so when people hear about Missoula County and elections, the story that comes to mind is the story that we put out, not the story that someone else has put out. This is a very important and timely thing.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate you underscoring that. Okay, if there's no other questions, then I'm going to close out our subcommittee report on outreach and move to research. Christina, did you have that research report?
I do. I'm sorry. Working to get my, can you hear me?
Yes. There's a bit of a lag, and you appear to be on mute. Still muted.
I'm
There
trying.
you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. You're muted again.
How about now?
Good.
Okay. I will make this brief. I'm not sure what's happening with my technology, but it appears Teams causes lots of struggles for my computer. So just a couple of things. We've met a few times since the last EAC meeting as the research committee to talk about what are our goals and objectives in terms of what data do we want to have, what data supports the work of Bradley and Nathan and their team, and how can we effectively gain this data from our community in a cost-effective way. And to underscore Commissioner Slotnick's points, we have this baseline data about confidence from 2015 and 2020 in the electoral process, which really puts us in a better position to share information with the public in a way that other organizations wouldn't. So a couple of main points that as a group we need to arrive at a conclusion about. One is, who are we researching? Who are we talking to? And we've gone back and forth a series of times about the benefits and drawbacks of certain sample populations. Historically, we've talked to voters, people that are registered, because the list is affordable, and because if we're using the EAC to conduct this research, Bradley can pull that list of registered voters without the research team having to go to the Secretary of State's office to purchase it. Another interest of the group has been non-voters. Historically, non-voters are extremely difficult to outreach to because we have to either create a list, which is extraordinarily time intensive, or we have to purchase a list, which is also expensive. One other piece that I would add to that is that non-voters, there's social desirability when we conduct research, right? So if somebody calls you and asks, you know, are you planning on voting in the next election? You know that the desirable response is, yes, I am, and not, no, I'm not. And so sometimes when we outreach to difficult groups like non-voters, we have to think about other ways, other research tools that we have in our toolkit than what we might use normally, right? So historically, we've done polling. But if we wanted to reach to non-voters, my professional opinion as a researcher is that it would be ineffective to conduct a telephone poll. We want to look at a different approach, something like a focus group where we can get a group together to talk about things. So we need to decide our target group, voters or non-voters. We also need to figure out our timeline. We've talked a little bit about the opportunity to do informal research that's not statistically significant. We're not going to put out in a press release and say at the 95% confidence interval, we know these things to be true. But there's opportunities for us to conduct informal research about, you know, in between election cycles for specific issues that we might be curious about. For instance, do we wonder what's going to happen with BIPA? Do we wonder how that's affecting confidence? Do we wonder how January 6th is affecting confidence? Do we wonder about any of these point in time issues? So one of the questions that this group has come upon is, do we conduct a community study every federal election, so midterms and presidential? Do we only conduct a confidence study on presidential years, and then on quote unquote off years look at something like folks that registered to vote, that voted in the presidential but didn't vote in the midterm or didn't vote in the community, you know, our city council elections, our county commission elections, and ask them about what's their barrier, right? So between a high frequency voter and a lower frequency voter. So the question about cycle is something that we need to figure out as a group. And then we also want to determine what are the questions that we ask every single year. So one of the interests of Bradley and Nathan in the elections group is being able to have a dashboard of this data visible to the community, right? Research is only effective if we're able to communicate it, right? That's a scientific method. Being transmissible is what matters. Forgive me, I'm putting on my research teaching hat. But this is the part that really adds benefit to this work, right? If we can say to the public, this isn't kept in some locked file cabinet. It's not housed somewhere in some database that you can't access. It's a dashboard that you can go and interact with, the way that the county uses other data tools, like I believe you use Microsoft BI instead of, and not Tableau. But then you can go and look at what changes over time. What are we asking about? How is the community feeling? So there's an interest from the elections department to have that dashboard that's available. And to make that really effective, we need to ask the same questions over time, right? Because if we ask it one way one year and then a different way the other year, we're not comparing apples to apples, we're comparing apples to oranges. And so we've talked quite a bit about continuing to ask those questions around confidence. How confident are you in the system and in the process? But also, are there other pieces of that information that we want to capture from the group? And so I think in the interest of time, what would be most effective is doing a quick email poll after this call. Just I'm going to ask you yes/no questions like voters, non-voters, midterms, presidential, what we want to do, so we can come back to our next EAC meeting with a robust agenda to move forward. I think that covers the research committee. Is there anything that I'm missing from folks that have been participating?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
You wanted to do an email after this. An email of whom?
I believe the EAC, correct?
Correct, of the EAC.
Well,
So Christina
you know,
is looking for additional feedback on what direction we want to head with the research. And instead of hashing that out in this call, she's suggesting that a more efficient use of time is to do that with a follow-up email. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
But you know how we all feel. We're not the people that you need to find out that you need to research.
I think maybe I'm being unclear. The email follow-up for the EAC members is to decide on the topics, the timeline, and the target population, not about how we feel about elections and confidence.
Okay.
Susan, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah, Christina, in that that you send out, can you also, I wonder about costs. So if there's a cost associated with a particular idea, then we would need to consider budgetary constraints on that.
Absolutely. We can share what the cost of the historic polling has been. If folks are comfortable waiting a little while, I can reach out to some of my partners, in the research field about what the cost of doing something like a non-voter list would be, because I don't have that off the top of my head. Or I can sort of ballpark it for you in what my experience tells me it might be.
Christina, could you give us a range so that we have an idea?
Yeah, so just know that it'll take me a little bit of time to get some of that information together, but I am working on it and I will get it out to you because I think having that information helps inform our decision making.
Thank you. Other questions or comments for Christina? All right, hearing none. Christina, thank you for the thorough report. We appreciate it. Moving on into our agenda, we have a discussion about the areas of specialization. Bradley, I believe you're taking this piece.
I think we may have missed our recruitment subcommittee meeting. And I know that I've been chatting with Kathy and she's ready to give a quick update on that too.
I'm so sorry about that. Kathy, if you're ready, go right ahead.
Sure. We, in our meeting, we talked about three things. One about the meshing of recruitment and research, and probably the most important or the most active activity was with election judges have been able to have had to opt in to participate in other aspects of the election process. We determined that because these were people who were committed, that it was better to have them opt out and regard them as a captive audience of people who were available to do various activities, various promotional projects, all that, so that they would be in the pool unless they opted out, rather than having them opt in to the pool. The other thing that we talked about, the third thing, was about preparing a historical packet about the advisory committee and about elections and that kind of thing. Did I miss something, Brad?
No, that was really it. We talked about recruitment, kind of partnering back in, not so much with research, but with that outreach committee, because they are hand in hand. So it's great to hear outreach had the same ideas as well. The opt-out instead of the opt-in is huge. We trained 650 election judges who are concerned about the process, want to know more. And then we'd be able to say, if you don't want to know more about these positions, check here, instead of getting 10% of them to sign up to get more information. And the board packet will be really helpful. I'd love to kind of do an ad hoc committee so we could get in touch with people like Larry Dunham, Jeff Badenoch, those people who've been on the board in years past, who could help us inform and have a good packet of what we've done, when we've done it, and what it was like to serve at those times, so that when we're recruiting for the EAC, we don't need to start at square one and say, hey, do you have 2 hours once a quarter? We can give a little more information out. People can be more familiar what this whole process will look like.
Right, a base, provide a base.
I think that pretty well covers a lot of what we did on recruitment. We also made sure to go over those job descriptions and have those available. So if you have questions, you can reach out to people on the recruitment for those different aspects. But it was a really successful meeting. The opt-in versus, I'm sorry, the opt-out versus the opt-in is a huge win for recruiting more trained staff.
Okay. Questions?
All right, Kathy, thank you for the report out. It feels like the subcommittees are working and having good, productive, fruitful conversations and coming up with some real clear, distinct goals. So I'm really thrilled and just want to thank everyone who's been part of those subcommittee conversations. Next up on our agenda, as I previously said, I believe Bradley has a report back for us about the areas of specialization.
With the areas of specialization, Nathan and I have been working hard to reach out, and we have contacted just about everybody. There's a few more to schedule extra times in, but we wanted to make sure that we all had people aware of what the area they were looking at is when it comes into play. And the best example of this was Rebecca's area, which was resolutions to call elections. We had a little bit of a confusion around the city election for the primary. Similar to how all elections run, they must pass a resolution to hold the election. It was not mandated because there weren't enough candidates. They passed a resolution to hold an election for the mayor, Ward 1 and Ward 6. After they passed that resolution, one of the candidates was deemed ineligible for Ward 6. So we had to produce forward with a Ward 6 primary, even though both candidates will appear on the general. This is because those resolutions to call for an election are required, and there wasn't enough time for the city to notice a public meeting and state that since there's only 2 candidates for Ward 6, we would like to cancel that portion of the election and proceed forward. So it was a really unique time to share about how that lays in with the area of specialization, how the elections are functioning right now, and how the EAC were really trying to gain that knowledge and understanding of the processes that go on to help hold elections and what processes we follow by law to get to where we are. So that was great. Nathan's been working hard on outreach to a lot of other groups, stating, you know, if you're post-election audit, the next post-election audit will be next spring, and we want to make sure that we have you looped in and involved. We'll have canvases coming forward. That's a little bit of my presentation. And when we have our canvas, we're going to make sure that those people are invited to that portion so that they can be really familiar. So we're starting to really build in those areas of specialization and work directly with each of the individual people to make sure that we've got good flow, good understanding, and that we're getting that one-on-one time to explain those processes. Nathan.
Yeah, so just so that everybody knows where that stands with the areas of specialization, nearly everybody has now been contacted, and some of the areas that will become, shouldn't say more relevant, but more timely as the calendar rolls on, people will be contacted at those times. We are going to be having some, so I've got materials out to everybody who should be contacted at this point. We are also going to have tours of the process when we actually have an election going on, and we're going to, luckily for us, we have nearly 2 elections overlapping each other, the primary and the general election. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities coming forward for everyone on the EAC and the general public to come and witness the process live in action. And so everyone will get invitations to those as well. And so I also just wanted to mention really quickly on a housekeeping note, as far as combination or the melding and merging of the outreach and the recruitment committee goes, I'll try to make sure that everybody gets has access to all of the materials mutually so that you aren't stuck in one folder or the other. And that's pretty much all I have to add about the areas of specialization right now. If there are things that I've sent to, like say your area of specialization was ballot processing, but you would also like to know about resolutions and calling for elections, just let us know and we can get you any information that you need on any of the other areas, even if it isn't your chosen area. That's all I have, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. I want to suggest where we have an opportunity to tour the facilities and view the process in action, I want to encourage, first of all EAC members to take advantage of this opportunity and to really watch the nuts and bolts play out. And second, I would encourage you to reach out to 3 of your personal contacts, perhaps people who are in other circles or other organizations, and invite them to join you in touring the elections office. We all have meaningful, valuable relationships within this community, but if we don't use them, they may as well not exist. So let's do what we can to reach the people that we are connected with and bring more people into this process. Bradley, do you have anything else on areas of specialization, or do you want to move directly into your election administrator report?
I can do the update if we're all ready.
Were there any other questions on areas of specialization? I'm not seeing any, Bradley. I think you're ready to go.
Okay, great, guys. I'm going to try and be very mindful of everybody's time. We've got just short of 40 minutes to get through this presentation and update, and we can make sure that we have some time for questions. So I'm going to go pretty quick, and then we'll open it for questions at the very end. We're going to talk about the recent May election, the upcoming September and November elections. We're going to talk about some of these budget requests and the future plans and how they relate to the EAC. We'll also then talk a bit about the records requests that are ongoing. For the school and special district election, we had an incredibly successful election for the school special district election on the 4th of May. We had a lower turnout, which is pretty standard for a smaller election like this. It was 28.96%. We had a 30.77% ballot return rate. I did want to take a second and talk about this because there were the ongoing opinion articles about discrepancies in the Missoula County election. We had people from the public come to this. We are always open to the public. We want people to come learn and know about our processes. We're going to work throughout this to advertise that more and recruit more people to come. With this election, since it was a school board and a special district election, the school boards were sent their information and they canvassed their trustee or levy bond elections. We work with the Board of County Commissioners and we covered the Lolo Community Council, the Frenchtown Rural Fire District, and Seeley Lake Rural Fire District. We did have observers who read those articles and they wanted to be present at the public count. So we got the opportunity to walk them through the public count. We explained all of our processes from testing to what we're doing with our resolution ballots. They had a great phrase for our resolution ballot table. They called it the every vote counts table because that's the reality of what that table is if you've mailed your ballot in, we want to make sure the voters' vote is counted as they intended. We also had them present at the canvass. Since I've worked with the elections office, this is the first time we've had somebody come to observe the canvass process. And this is important because the canvass process is where we are going through and we're certifying that every ballot we've marked as accepted has been counted. No ballots were counted more than once or misplaced. So as we were saying right here, we open those returns and we present them to the independent canvass board. And they're given 3 different options for this. They can ask to have an inspection of the ballots, a recount for that race or election, or they can go forward and they can ask that they certify the results and they're either sent for further certification or sent to elect those officers. When we did this, we treated each special district as their own election. This helps us break down how many ballots were sent for Frenchtown Fire District compared to the total number of ballots for all of the school districts and elections. We managed to balance identically on every issue with the exception of one form that wasn't filled out correctly, but we did have the corresponding ballot counting through, and we were able to show that missorted ballot, and all election results were certified. This is what we're talking about with public tours of the process. We want to show that, yes, our processes are open to the public, but we want to take that a step further, and we want to make sure that we're inviting members of the public, the media, candidates, and campaigns to come and see this process so they too can feel confident. For the fall election coming forward, I'll put this in the folder. I'm going to go right through here. We put together a great FAQ and had a media release that covered when ballots will go out, that it's an all-mail election, a little bit about what happened with Ward 6 with that one candidate who won't appear on the ballot. And we're working on a big update, which will include a social media campaign, as well as a few other areas to help spread the word about this. One of the first things that we've gotten together is our handout card. We partnered with Clearwater Credit Union in the last election cycle to hand out these quick cards that help give out information for voters. On the screen here, you see the front and the back of a business card size handout. We can print those on regular paper. We can ask for other organizations to help assist with providing this information out so that all voters can be confident in this election process and knowing that their vote will count in the election. Election process tours. We will hold specific tours and we'll be putting out a press release about this in the next month. They will be for our early ballot prep, our equipment testing. They will be for our counting on election day, and they will also be for just general processes to help show people. We're going to hit these hard. We're going to make sure that every single person who's running for office knows and can come so that they can see and feel confident in this. We're going to make sure that the public can come and see these processes, because I truly do feel that it is either a lack of education in these processes or an intent to mislead voters. And we want to provide every option we can to educate people to make sure that they know and understand how these processes work. I'm going to hit on budget updates and some future plans. So we already talked about it. We have these are our outstanding requests. As Josh was talking about earlier, the way the budget process goes forward is at the end of the fiscal year, we present forward any requests for new funding for the next year, whether it's an ongoing request, a grant-funded request, or a one-time request. As they were talking about looking and prioritizing our different areas, this is what we presented at the beginning of January. We asked for $40,000 to produce election videos, these short videos that are professionally produced and edited that help voters understand complex processes in a simple, quick video. We have talked about and passed the need to upgrade our reporting software. We're currently paying for 2 different sets of coding, and we're also utilizing a old ballot style, which can contribute to a 2-page ballot, front, back, and front of another page. This equates to a substantial cost to taxpayers in Missoula for printing, for processing, for storing, for making sure that we tabulate. They have to run both sets of ballots through. And this is a necessary upgrade to bring all of our equipment onto one system and to help saving costs in the future. We do have that ongoing request for ballot return postage. We crunched all of our numbers based off of a 50% return rate, with 50% coming in through the mail, and asked for ballot return postage. For the upcoming primary election, we did increase that slightly, but the primary elections are not very high turnout, so we were trying to keep this number something that we would utilize, however, something that we would not need to come back to the commission and say we did not expect this number of people to mail in a ballot. We did put in the ongoing request for a survey of voters, so I wanted to hit on this a little bit. With the budget schedule coming forward, we needed to ensure that we have in a request and the budgetary authority to run the survey of voters. The survey of voters, we did receive a quote on. It's just shy of $20,000 with the addition of $5,000 to help create that dashboard so that we can share out this information publicly. With this budget request being in, if the EAC wants to provide guidance to the commission and myself that they would like to look at a different sort of survey, we do have that request in, and if it changed that, we might have to ask for a budgetary amendment to increase that money if it was deemed that you thought it was in the best interest to do a $40,000 survey of non-voters through focus groups. I would like to reiterate the fact that this is advisory, and so we present to the commission, the EAC can present to the commission, but that final decision kind of resides with our office and the EAC and the budgetary team. We're going to work hard, and this is an aspect where we're working closely with the things coming out of the subcommittees, videos, surveys, other aspects as far as making sure we have good outreach in it. We did put in an election overnight security request. What we saw is that there were heightened security concerns around the physical ballots. If somebody were to break into the election office, they could damage the election to the point where we could no longer proceed forward with that election, knowing that voted ballots had been destroyed. We have great video surveillance. We are looking into alarm system aspects, but physical security presence would be able to help ensure that we could prevent an aspect like this from happening instead of having video footage of somebody who broke in and burned thousands of ballots. Unfortunately, we do feel that that is a necessary request. In addition to this, this relates into the discussion we had last time about equipment, precinct level tabulators. With the upgrade of our reporting software, precinct level tabulators would no longer function. Do we want to proceed forward with purchasing precinct level tabulators? We did put in this budgetary request. It does have HAVA funding to support a majority of it, a little over half. But if we don't have this budgetary request in, we don't have the authority to proceed forward with this. We want this to be a robust discussion. With the number of people we have voting at polling places, we want to make sure that we're being wise stewards of taxpayer dollars and that this is the investment that the county wants to make across the board in our election process. What this would do is it would allow polling place voters to be able to deposit their ballot into a machine to get tabulated. We are the last county of our size that has not gone to a central count where all ballots are brought into the main area. $163,000 is a lot of money. So this will allow us the opportunity to have a public discussion and decide what's going to be the best area for voters and utilize this public discussion to making our final decision. We're looking for a door at the warehouse. We want to upgrade our warehouse door so that it functions a little better, opens and closes correctly. And this is part of adding in key card controls, which would give us better identification of each of the different areas where people may be accessing where sensitive election records are stored. And the last request we put in was for a democracy fellow. This is part of the ongoing partnership and work that we're doing to partner with the Masters in Public Administration program. There are a few colleges across the nation which provide a certificate in election administration. We want to work towards an end goal of having the University of Montana be one of those colleges where you could get a certificate on election administration. Many people who come into a role similar to mine come into this role because they decided to run for a clerk and recorder and don't know the nuts and bolts of running elections. This will be an excellent opportunity for us to partner with the MPA program, and that Democracy Fellow is going to work on unique outreach, as well as an aspect of comparing Montana Code Annotated with our processes, the administrative rules, as well as the election judge handbook. There are some areas where we want to show that we are meeting every area of the law and going above. And there are other areas we want to identify where we'll be working to make sure that we can identify areas where the administrative rules haven't been updated to match the laws. And the last time they were updated was 2011. We need to help work and make sure that we are identifying some of those areas so we can work with the state Secretary of State's office to identify all of that. We did put in funding requests for HAVA funding for additional security cameras as well. We were one of the first offices to do video footage of areas where ballots are being processed. It's not required under Montana state law, but we're a tip of the spear in Missoula County, and we want to make sure that we're doing this. And as we're building new spaces at the election center, we want to cover those. Recently, there was an article that had mentioned that we had too many voters on the list, which was an excellent idea for us to talk again about the National Voter Registration Act. This is the same slide from the last EAC presentation that talks about how this process goes. We went through and we canceled voters who were inactive for the last two federal general elections. For voters who missed the last federal election, we sent them a mailing to the address on file with a return service request. This states that our records indicate you did not vote in that last election. If you would like to remain as an active voter, please fill out this card. If we don't receive back a notice, there's no voter-initiated activity, or that notice did come back as undeliverable, on the 15th of last month, we sent out a second notice. It's sent to the same address on file as required by law, but it is forwarding service. So if that voter has moved from Missoula to another area, that can be forwarded to their house. If there's no reply or voter-initiated activities, these voters will be moved to an inactive status, and in a mail ballot election, they will not automatically be mailed a ballot. This is a standard process that we do in the odd-numbered years. We did wait for the Secretary of State's database to get an enhancement. The enhancement would have allowed us to run this in a different option, but that enhancement did not come out until too late for our process, knowing that it was extremely likely we would have a primary election. So we will actually be wrapping that up this week and moving those last voters who haven't replied to an inactive status before we prepare for the upcoming municipal primary election. Little update on the building area here. We are slated to have the parking lot in the south end of this building completed by the 12th of August. That is where we're slated to have it at. We'll see where we get to. We're going to be doing ballot prep for these upcoming areas here in this building. And so for the next election, we'll be using a lot of these new spaces. We are working on upgrades to the election center, the office building area. That'll likely happen after 2022. We wanted to push that off so it didn't impact the processing of ballots around the primary, general, and primary, the federal election cycle next year. Forgive me. Records requests. I'm going to post this into our documents that are available on the EAC website so that you can all access all of these links. When we last met, we discussed the Representative Sheeta records request as kind of a FOIA request and the two different requests that had been made at that point in time. Altered ballots, resolution ballots and machine errors, and also a count of the affirmation envelopes. In addition, they asked for ballots from the election that were through our resolution process, which were not available without a court order by law. The equipment coding, which was deemed proprietary, and we informed them to reach out to the vendor. And then they did ask for information about our resolution boards and communication, and we provided them out a roster and any communications. Since then, we have obviously had a count of affirmation envelopes. We don't stand by that counts process and the ultimate number from there. We have all of the envelopes, documentation to support it, and would welcome a legal challenge to this. That would very well clarify that there is not a discrepancy for this. And if they feel there's merit behind those allegations, they'll make that legal challenge. Now, in May and June, we received multiple other requests from Representative Sheeta and their representation. They asked for a copy of the purchase order of ballots, packing slips for the ballots, the original ballots that were not used, a list of every voter, ballot stubs, and records of a daily draw. We've got linked in here the official response from Missoula County. You can click these links and access those through. We are providing over all of the documentation that we have. Purchase orders are not required under record retentions. Packing slips are not required under records retention. We will provide access to the unused ballots with a court order from a district court judge. We have a voter list request going out. Stubs need a court order. And instead of a daily balance, we put stubs on mail ballot, printed ballots, so that we can audit every single ballot instead of every day. And so we don't do a daily audit. Instead, when the system issues a ballot, we confirm with that physical ballot that it does match and apply. The next request that came through was for a list of the election judges from the Central Committee. We notified them that we did not receive election judge lists from the Central Committee. We had requested access to the secrecy envelopes from the 2020 election to count and inspect those, and the tally of adjudicated ballots from the general election. We really want to make sure that we're utilizing the same terminology on this. Adjudicated ballots are never mentioned in Montana Code Annotated, Administrative Rules, or the Election Judge Handbook. So we've reached back out for clarification. We believe they may be referring to resolution ballots, and we're preparing up information about that. And we did submit them an invoice for the request to count the secrecy envelopes. We do have a couple of updates to our policy to ensure that we have counted all of these records and provided an accurate count to the requester. And as the stewards of public records, in the most efficient manner possible, we have asked staff one of their review boards with one of our people to ensure that no records have gone missing through this process. Or we could proceed forward, have them remain there, and count them back in with our own process. We're working through this information right now with the records requester and should be able to follow up as we know more. We also received a request for information around the Center for Tech and Civic Life grant. We're working on providing out all of that documentation. We provided forward a few different areas of pulled emails to provide to the requesters. The biggest aspect is that we have our final report coming through this month, so we wanted to provide them a full and accurate accounting of it instead of just the partial accounting from January. They asked for an updated list of all of the election judges with the address and the party affiliation. We're currently discussing with the county attorney's office. We believe we'll be providing that out. However, there are some concerns about security and safety of the people whom are volunteering and the concern about recruitment in the future, knowing that this could be public information. With this, as stewards of public records, if it is a public record and it is available to go out, we are happy to provide it. If it's a public record that requires a court order, we will require that court order before providing it, but we'd be happy to do so if a judge deems that necessary. We received an additional follow-up for all of these areas, stating that we had not yet replied. We are working on a final report, pulling emails, and we'll send out information on this. The last area was judges with party affiliation. I had them kind of duplicated in there. Okay, jumping through to allow time for questions with about 15 minutes left. I did want to let everybody know about the SOS database improvements. I worked very closely on database improvements for the current database, and am the product owner by proxy for the new database that the Secretary of State is working on. So I work about a day a week on making sure that the database improvement for the new one is working and functioning correctly. There are strong concerns from election administrators across the state for a successful rollout with training and implementation. A good example is last week we went and set up the primary election, and it tried to generate the ballots by party style. There are a lot of areas to look at to a successful rollout of a new voter database. The election administrators across the state have been working closely with the Secretary of State and the developers to address those concerns to make sure that we have good training and the rollout. There's a big discussion about what the best time frame is going to be to get this new database rolled out, and the incredible concern from every election administrator that it functions correctly. With all of the list requests we've gotten, if for some reason the database produced inaccurate information, that could be a very, very big problem. Jumping in, questions. Made it. 15 minutes left for questions. Close out, next meeting date. What do you guys have?
All right, Bradley, thank you for the thorough report out. What questions do we have for Bradley? Todd, looks like you're first up.
Hi, Bradley. Is there any mechanism, as there is in some other situations, when people are requesting vast amounts of information, to recompense the county for the cost of providing it?
Yes, absolutely. So I mentioned in there that we did invoice them for presentation of the public records. We are always trying to balance being good stewards of taxpayer dollars and providing open access to public records. What we're seeing right now is that we have good access to public records, but some of these requests are far outside our normal practices. And with them being far outside our normal practices, they'll require extensive staff hours. That's the invoice that we've sent over to the records requester, and we are staying strong that we would like to be compensated beforehand.
Oh, good. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
That's great. A follow-up question on Todd, and then we're going to go to Susan. How many hours has your staff spent on trying to fulfill this records request?
I just started tracking the recent records requests. We didn't really track them as we started because we didn't see that being a big issue. However, anecdotally, I would say we spend about 4 hours a week directly on the records request. This aspect is compounded because it also includes updates to commissioners. It includes our communications department. It includes our county attorney department. And so I've been trying to track that to get an idea of the costs. We have seen so many public records requests at the county level that there has been a specific request to add a FTE staff hour through taxpayer dollars to help coordinate and run through these records requests. One of the records requests we got was for every single invoice and every single email to and from every potential vendor for the CTCL grant. You know, that's about 4 hours of time. But then there's the additional time of us discussing with the county attorney, should we bill for this? How should we pull this in? And we don't want to bill for standard practices, but we do want to make sure that we're not using taxpayer dollars on a public records request that should be funded in that capacity. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, it does. Thank you for answering that. Susan, you're next.
Yeah, I have a question related to recruitment. If with stories of election workers being threatened and having scary things happen, and with requests for party affiliations of election judges, you broke up a little bit on my system when you were talking about that, but what is the status of that? I would be concerned about trying to recruit with that kind of information going out.
You know, with that information going out, I think that I've been looking into this really strong because that's a huge portion of what we do is train election judges to help serve voters at polling places. Voters have the opportunity to state that they are a no party. We were looking at updating the new forms to include not willing to reply, you know, or would not like to answer, because then we have the opportunity to state that you're a minor party, other party that you'd like to identify, a major party, or that you did not want to provide that information. In a polling place election, it is required that we work with the list provided from central committees to balance those polling places as evenly as possible. The time frame between training and when these lists need to come through does not align. It's another one of these areas where Montana Code Annotated could be updated to meet the realities of where elections are run currently. So what we do is we do recruitment directly with the central committees. We come in and we state, hey, we are preparing to recruit, and we request that people self-identify. We use that to help make sure we do not staff a majority of one party, and where possible on resolution boards, there's one member of each party. When it's not provided from the central committees, we need to balance it from what we have recruited. With future recruitment, we would just add in that opportunity to say would not like to respond.
So then how would you create the resolution board if the person has said they don't wish to respond? How would you create that balance?
So that's where those lists from the central committee would come into play. Right now, we've had a really great area where people self-identified, felt comfortable. I feel like many would still feel comfortable and still self-identify. If not, we could get the list from the central committee, confirm that they've been trained, and utilize them as identifications that this is truly somebody who should be on the Democratic Party list. In other counties, when they don't get the lists, they don't worry about it at all. In Missoula County, we like to go a step above and beyond. So we ask people to self-identify and try and align. If we do not have enough judges from those central committee of lists, we're not required to balance.
Okay. Thank you, Bradley.
You bet.
Thank you for the question, Susan. Other questions or comments for Bradley?
Oh, I do have one more question. The slideshow that you had, Bradley, had a lot of links. Will you be sending us those slides so we can access the links?
You bet. I'm going to send them to everybody on the EAC, to the central committees, and then I'll also be putting them in the EAC handout section.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
All right. Other questions or comments?
And 21 minutes after the hour, I think I did good.
Can the public ask a question?
Yeah, we'll take questions from the public. Go right ahead.
Okay.
Could you identify yourself for the record, though, please?
Okay, so this is Cameo Flood. I was just wondering from Bradley of those cards that you sent out about the people that didn't vote. Did you get anybody say, I did vote? Why am I getting this card?
We did. We had 2 people who claimed that they had voted. And with the way that we processed through this election, we utilized the Secretary of State's database. And we scan it as barcodes, the unique ID off of the affirmation envelope, and that's what produces the list. So we had 2 people who had said, you know, I voted. I know that I voted. And we informed them that, you know, we can pull you out of this section. By law, we're required to send this out. Here's the tool that we advertised that lets you track whether your ballot was accepted or not. Our records did not indicate that your ballot was accepted. And we worked directly with those voters to show how that process worked and what had happened there. And, you know, that's a hard conversation to have. I swear I voted. I feel like I should not be included in this list. What did you do with my vote? Let me explain the process on how this works, because this process is followed by everybody. We were able to work with the voter and identify it, and they felt comfortable in it. We did inform them that they were welcome to reach out to the Secretary of State's office in other areas, but without that unique barcode scanned into the system, following through this full process, we did not track that vote as an accepted vote. And so we must follow the law in these areas. And it's really interesting because we see, why would you do this list maintenance? Don't do this list maintenance. It makes it harder for voters to vote. And then we also see the opposite side. Is, when we're doing this, you should be doing more. And when we're following this process, well, maybe we don't really like it. So there's a lot of areas there. We did have 2 people who identified that way.
Thank you, Bradley. Thank you for the question. Thank you for joining us. Any other questions or comments for Bradley? All right, seeing or hearing none, we're going to go ahead and close out this section. And moving on, do we have any items under new business? I'm not seeing any. Seeing none, let's go into comments from committee members. Are there any comments from committee members? I'll just say a couple things. So I just want to let you all know one of the reasons that I've decided not to run as chair again, and I'm really excited about Christina moving into this role. First of all, I want to say I want to continue to work on the committee. I have no desire to drop off of this committee. It's something I take a lot of pride in, and it is an honor and privilege. Second, the primary reason why I'm stepping back in this capacity is that we found out back in February that my wife is pregnant and we are expecting our first child. So I'm going to be taking on a new organizing role, so to speak. And incredibly excited about it. And I don't want to overcommit myself to something that I can't complete. So I think the timing is perfect. I'm so glad that we have all worked together to expand the number of folks on the committee, the reach that we have within our community. We have so much talent and so much experience on this team, and I have every confidence that Christina is going to take it to new heights. So I will continue to work with you. I'll continue to work with Bradley and Nathan. I will make myself available as a resource for Christina and help her get up to speed. But for right now in my life, I need to step back from some of my commitments and roles, and this is one of them. So I greatly appreciate, Christina, you stepping up. Travis, again, you're a fantastic vice chair. I really appreciate you as a partner for the last year, and I know that you'll continue to offer excellent leadership. So I just want to let you all know that, and again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your service on this committee. It's a joy.
Congratulations, Denver.
Thank you, Todd. All right. So moving on from comments from committee members, we need to set our next meeting date. Bradley, what are you thinking?
So the next meeting that we have scheduled upcoming will be directly after the primary election, before the general election, October 12th, 3 p.m. Now, between October and currently, we'd like to schedule subcommittee meetings, and then I'll be doing some outreach to everybody on the EAC around some of the outreach we're doing about this election, asking for help in sharing important messages. And we'll make sure to invite everybody to those tours too.
Wonderful. That sounds like a plan. So October 12th, 3 p.m. We all can put that on our calendars. That takes us to the end of our agenda. I would just also note on the second page of our agenda, there's some important dates, so I encourage you all to keep those in mind. With that being said, we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. This is Susan.
Has been moved by Susan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Let's go with Todd on that one. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say no. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Thank you, folks, for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Denver.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Ken.